So week 4, it's about chapter 7, which that is about handling errors. There are two main ways discussed to handle errors in this chapter. So you've got exception handling and just data validation. So these videos are going to be about the specifics of those things. I did and then you have two labs, 2 parts, 1 lab, 2 parts. It's really 2 different labs, honestly, but you've got one where you do the classic temperature conversion. I don't want to say more about it right now. Maybe I'll make a video about it later, but it requires exception handling to be implemented. And then you test the data validation understanding in this one about the stadium seating. So this one will requires data validation. Okay, so I also kind of want to review. So I've got this. I've started a new Windows Forms project, and I just kind of want to review. I might like pause here to take time to get things looking right, but I want to show you the steps again. So I started a new project. I called this one what did I call it? Handling errors or something. Errors demo. So I'm going to go over those steps just as a review. The first thing you should probably do is rename your form. And again, it's not so essential for these early programs to have this kind of renaming, but it's a good habit to get into. So FRM errors demo is what I called this form. Hit enter. You should get this dialog. I don't even read it anymore, so I just click yes. It's going to rename. It's going to refactor that form, or so all the references to it that have already been generated will match. Sometimes something goes wrong here. I suggest this is the first thing you do, and if it gives you some kind of weird error, then like delete the project. Go to the folder where the project is, get rid of it, and then recreate it, or recreate it with a different name maybe if it's not a specific name you have to use for class. So as you notice, if you do that, you look under properties, should be renamed if I got it selected. If you select the form after that, you should see the name is now form errors demo. All right, I'm going to pause and set up some text boxes and labels and stuff, and then when I come back, that'll be ready to talk about some more stuff. Okay, I put the controls I think I want on this to do my little demo, and so just as more review, I want you to look at something, because this is something. The reason I'm doing this review is because a lot of people are kind of it's a common thing, especially when you're doing forms kinds of things and you're first starting. People are not getting this quite right. So I see I have all these on here already, right? Text boxes, some radio buttons. These are all grouped on the form. These are the only radio buttons I'm going to use in this, so it's okay that they're all just on the form and not in a box somewhere. If you don't understand, that's okay. Just know that they're radio buttons, and only one of them can be selected at a time. And I've got a couple buttons, and what I want you to do is look down here when I click on each one of these things. See how it says text box 1? It's called that because that's the first text box I put on this form. That's the third one. It doesn't matter which one it is, but I am actually going to switch them because it just feels better too. Because I want this to be 1 and 2, and this is 3. So that's text box 2, text box 3. Those are the names of these things. So what you should do, and you can do different things. You can put everything on and then rename them all, which is kind of what I'm doing. But I would do like each group at a time. So here's what I'm saying. And I might do a little pause here in a second to skip the rest of it. But you want to rename these things as soon as possible. Don't do any programming. Like if you check the code behind, let me show you real quick. I can't do, of course, I can't do that. If I go to view and code, this is going to be the code behind. See, I haven't done anything. Don't do anything. If you accidentally double click on something and create an event handler, either just leave it and ignore it, or but if you're like me and you have to do the housekeeping, remember that you have to delete it from the code that's automatically generated in the designer document, this document over here. You have to delete the delegate that's created, the plus equals button 1 click or whatever. Okay, the dog's only barked like 3 times. So back from that pause, and I'm back to the designer. So do this as soon as possible. Rename these things. So I'm going to call this left operand. Whenever you have this is going to be an arithmetic example. It needs to be really simple for this exception handling. So this is going to be called txt left operand. This is going to be txt right operand. Make sure they make sense too. I mean, like if I put the left on the right and vice versa, that wouldn't make a lot of sense, right? And then this is going to be where the answer is. I'll call it txt result. Now I've named all the text boxes, and if I refer to them in code, it'll make sense, right? You won't actually have it named text box 1 and you're trying to refer to txt left operand. There isn't one. There has to be something of that name in the controls when you refer to it in code, if you're actually talking about it. And make sure you name the right things too. These are text boxes. These are the TXTs. These are radio buttons. I think it's RDO. That's what I'm going to use anyway. These are BTN buttons. Name the right things. If you have labels, don't call them TXT whatever. That's going to confuse you because they're not TXTs. They're LBLs. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and rename the buttons to, I'm just going to go ahead and rename all this stuff so you can see me do it. So BTN, this is going to be calculate. That's what I'm going to click in order to do the calculation. And this is going to be BTN exit. So this is going to be what I click to exit the program. If you want to, I'm concentrating on naming all these things first. Then you want to go back and maybe do the text properties of these things. That's cosmetic. You're not referring to those things in code necessarily. It's just what it looks like on the form. So I'll show you what I mean by that in a second here. But let's go ahead and do this radio button. This is going to be addition. So this is how I determine which operation I'm doing. So I'll do addition, subtraction, RDO, difference. That's just another word for subtraction. RDO, multiplication. Well, product. I should, yeah. Multiplication. I should be consistent here. If I'm going to call these the operations, I should call this one. The difference is the result of subtraction, right? So RDO subtraction. I try to be consistent about how I do things. This would be RDO division. And this would be RDO. I never know which one's the actual right term. Modulus, modulo. That's the difference between nominative and dative or ablative in Latin, so I don't know why. Anyway, modulo, modulus, I'm just going to say mod. So I'll have to think about it. They all kind of mean the same thing when you're talking to a programmer. So now at this point, you might want to also, if you've done this, maybe do this too. Okay, I think I've renamed them all. I can go. No, go and make sure. So click on each one at a time. Make sure it's called TXT something or it's called RDO something, that you've renamed it, that makes sense to you. Check for typos too. I noticed a couple typos. You might have like multiplication or something, and then like you write multiplication in your code and it doesn't know what you're talking about. It's because you made a typo on the form. BTN, etc. I'm going to pause and do the text properties and come back and show that. Okay, we're back after a pause. And like I said, some of you grading, I'm not good at, mine's not beautiful. I need somebody with a design eye to lay this out better. But so don't worry about that. I have renamed everything. Renamed. I didn't rename. I did not rename. I did that already. You've seen that already. I changed the text properties. This is just cosmetic. This is for you to talk to the user who includes yourself when you're testing it, right? So I've changed these radio buttons to have in their text properties stuff that you can see. And you might want to just double check that you're doing the right one, right? Is the right name which this is the thing that matters in your code. Is it matching what's cosmetic for the user, so the user knows that it's additions? You might want to double check that. I'm not going to go through and double check them all, but I just wanted to show you. I even put the access keys for the buttons in here. I didn't do anything with the tab index. I may or may not do that in between. I might do it in a pause. And one other thing you might want to do though for the buttons is, where is it? Oh, this is for the whole form. So you select the form, which by the way, I also changed this text property. So the title bar is not just whatever it was, form 1, or that's by default it's form 1. So, just to make it look slightly prettier. But if you go to the form itself, you should have an accept button somewhere. Let's see, there it is. So once you put buttons on your form, you have a drop down box to pick from. So my accept button will be calculate. So if I type in the text boxes and hit enter, then that will do the computation. It will click this button, in other words. Hitting enter will click the calculate button instead of having to do it with the mouse. And there should be, was it a cancel button? Cancel button. Then I'll pick exit. If you hit the escape key, that will exit. It's not something you necessarily have to do every time, but it's something I need to show you again, because you need to know it exists. Also, I forgot to put labels in here for the text boxes. So I'm going to add those real quick and then show you after they're completely done. Okay, back from edit. I've added the labels so it's more easy to see what we're doing here. Now I tried not to get fancy. One thing I considered doing was putting a drop box in between, not drop box, drop down menu. What's the word? Combo box. Anyway, to show, so you could select which operand you want instead of doing radio buttons, but that's something later. I don't want to like how do you do that? I don't want to distract. So, but regardless, let me get back to this. I added these labels just so the user can see what these text boxes are supposed to mean. And there's fancier ways to group these things together later on in advanced code you can learn, but right now they're just kind of next to each other, and that's how you know that they're related conceptually. They're not related in code at all. The program's not going to care about those labels at all, and that's why I didn't rename them. You may rename them. It's not wrong to rename them, but if you don't refer to these labels in code, there's no reason really to rename them, except, just your sense of orderliness maybe. Same thing for this. All three of these labels, I just kept the default names. But I did change the text properties so that the user can see what they're supposed to mean. So this is a conceptual, this is a semantic thing that for human beings, this has nothing to do with your code. Now, that's not always true of labels. Sometimes you use labels for output. As a matter of fact, that's what I tend to do until like the book was showing the text read-only thing, and text boxes, and I kind of like the way it looks because it's got the border around it, and like it is actually better for output in my opinion. But sometimes you'll use labels for output. If you do that, then you do need to name it something sensible, like LBL result, LBL answer, or something. But I'm not using the labels for any kind of output or any kind of calculations or anything in this, so I'm going to leave them named their default. I did also add this, as I might have hinted, I changed the read-only property of where my answer is going to be to true. So if I select that text box, you'll see that it's read-only. Where's read-only? I have my eyesight's so bad. It's been changed to true from false. You can see it's kind of grayed out. That doesn't allow anybody to type in it. One other thing, like I said, I didn't do it behind the scenes, but I should have gone ahead and done it. I might want to look at the tab index here and just make sure it's 0. It's the lowest one, because I do want to, actually I'll make that one 1, and I want this one to be right after. So if you hit tab to navigate around, I don't know why I moved. Those two are right after each other. Those are the only two things. Well, and then okay, let's just go through the whole thing. The tab index for the button should be, let's see, what have I got? 0, 1, and then it should be 2. And then the exit should be 3. In that order. So that if you do run this, I'm going to go ahead and run it. This is a thing you should do. I'm running it almost too early, actually. But I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. Just keep in mind, I've got 2 screens, so it pops up on the other one. So this is how the tab, if I hit tab, this is how it navigates. And you might want to change it to do some of these things too. I'm just going to concentrate on these boxes and buttons, but it's up to you if you follow along, whether you do or not. So what I just did is also a testing thing. After you go through and rename everything, if you think you've got everything going to use, and there's nothing to keep you from adding something later if you find out you need it after you start writing your code or whatever. But if you think you're done, then do one last check, especially on the name. So maybe in the property window, scroll up to where you see name, and then just go over all the things that, I guess it's not going to do it for me. It's not going to stay up there. I hate having to do this. But everything that's going to be referred to in code should have a proper name, a reasonable name. What happens if I group these and look? I don't think, yeah, it's not going to, it's going to show what they have in common. They don't have the same name. So, I hate doing this. There's probably a way for me to fix this up where I want to when I click, but whatever. It's we're doing it live. Anyway, it looks okay. So once you make sure one last pass everything's named correctly, then click start or F5 or control F5, however you launch your programs, and make sure it runs and you haven't done something that makes it crash. A crash, by the way, is an example of an exception, usually, if not always. So that's what we're talking about today. This video was really just to get this set up. It took, what, 15 minutes even with all the pausing or more. So I'm going to stop here, just call this setup. And then we're going to talk more about exceptions in the next video, and I'm going to demonstrate what they are, how they work and stuff. So just bear in mind, this is just the cosmetic part and making sure you name everything correctly. There is no code behind it. So when you do almost any of these, I'm going to just say this. When you do almost any of these projects, after you've got everything named properly and laid out properly, and you think you're ready to start writing code, go look at your code, make sure you don't have any. If you have any code, you probably didn't want it. So what I'm trying to say is that at this point, you shouldn't have any code. It depends, like once you become your own fledgling programmer in .NET, you can do it however you want. You might actually add a button and then do the code for it, and then you can go back and forth between the code and designer. That's a personal artistic choice, but I'm recommending for you students in general, the average student is going to want to do it this way, where you get all the layout done first. Rename everything please rename everything properly. I get so many, and I don't mind them. I know it's a common thing. You're not weird, but I want to prevent it as much as possible. It's a common thing when you're doing these OOED, object-oriented, event-driven things that are GUI design driven, where you have the designer of the form and all that. It's a common thing not to name things properly, and the code and the form design mismatch, and you get errors. So try to be, you can save yourself a lot of headache if you just get this part we did in this video down. I'm kind of glad. I wasn't meaning originally to make this video so extensively on that topic, but I'm glad I did. So I'll bring special note to it maybe in the announcements. I'll see you in the next one.